CIHT Dubai, which is entitled Planning, Executing and Responding to Road Safety Audits. Just some housekeeping notes for everyone in the audience. Your microphone and your camera should be turned off at all times. We always have one or two people who turn their microphone on. If you can make sure that it's turned off, please. If you're asking questions or raising points, can you use the chat feature of Zoom, which is the top right of the main window, and send a message to all participants. We do have a moderated Q&A session after the main presentation, and your question or your points will be answered then. If you can, please confine any questions or points to the topic in hand. And as I say, basically the Q&A will be moderated by Nabras from the CIHT group after the presentation. The seminar is being recorded and there will be a copy made available on request by email. Just our agenda today, after the welcome and introduction, our speakers will be giving a presentation on road safety audit in the context of the United Arab Emirates and the processes which apply here. It is worth emphasizing that the techniques in the UAE are somewhat different than other parts of the world, in particular from the UK and the US, and I'm aware there are a number of colleagues joining us from outside of the UAE, so just bear that in mind. There may be some general lessons which are applicable, but the precise procedures in other countries, there are other CIHT webinars and events which will cover those in a bit more detail. We'll have a question and answer session at the end, and then we'll aim to complete or conclude by about 7:30 this evening. So just some brief introductions. My name is Jonathan Spear. I'm the chair of the CIHT Dubai group, and I think probably most of you on the call will know this, but about CIHT itself, we're a membership organisation based mainly in the UK, but we have about 1,000 members internationally, based mainly in Ireland, Hong Kong, Malaysia, and now the UAE. We're founded in 1930, so 90 years old, with about 14,000 members in 85 different countries. And our aim really is about the sharing and dissemination of good practice, of policy advice and research, and the exchange of technical knowledge and information. CIHT is open to all of those who work in the highways and the transportation sector, everything from infrastructure engineering, transport policy, intelligent transport systems, sustainability, regulations, business development, and of course we have members from the public sector and from the private sector and from academia as well. So what very wide membership, and we're now in the UAE. And the group was established in November of last year, originally conceived at the World Road Congress in Abu Dhabi, which was held in October last year. And our initial focus at the moment is on holding seminars and knowledge sharing events, but we are also looking at support and mentoring for professional qualifications and continuing professional development. It's early days, and like everyone else, we have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly being unable to hold physical face-to-face meetings at the Bentley Institute in Dubai, but we are continuing in a revised format, for example, by putting seminars like this online, and that's indeed helping us to attract a wider audience and interest. We've published our first newsletter, and there are further details on the CIHT website, or you can email us on our Gmail address, which is shown here. of the committee. There's 15 people on the committee. They're shown here. If anyone else wishes to offer support or ideas for how we can develop in Dubai or the UAE, please get in touch. We're happy to add to our numbers moving forward. And with that, I'd like now to introduce our speakers. David George is currently a road safety specialist at Al Ain City Municipality and is specialised in road safety engineering since the 1990s, and extensive experience on road safety audits in the UK, Europe, and the Middle East, now in the UAE, writing and presenting on a range of road safety training topics, including on UK television. And David is also a past vice chair of the Society of Road Safety Auditors, SoRSA, which is a association associated closely with CIHT itself. Nandish Kuster is currently road safety specialist for Abu Dhabi Municipality, and again, experienced road safety auditor, involved again in extensive road safety audits across the country, and in this capacity has presented numerous conferences and seminars within the region. So with no further ado, I would like David and Nandish, I think Nandish, you might be kicking off.
Yes, please.
You basically take the floor and commence your presentation, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Jonathan. And thank you everybody for joining. We would be discussing something about road safety audits and sharing the knowledge and experience. If you can go to the next slide, please. Welcome to all our international guests. As Jonathan has already mentioned earlier, the presentation is aimed at the Middle East, and some of the issues and discussions would be particular to the UAE itself, and hence these may not be relevant to other parts of the world. However, we could always learn from each other's experience, and if you have any queries, you could put them in the chat and it will be taken up at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. Yes. Why are we here? We assume that everybody here is involved in some element of design, provisioning, and operations of a road network. We all want to ensure that the provision of and operations of the network is safe and efficient as possible. And we want to learn from each other. Engineer Dave and myself have some experience, or quite a lot of experience in road safety, and we want to use the platform to share our knowledge to other aspirants and give you more knowledge about the road safety audit process. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The early days of road safety audit, just go back a slide, please. We missed a slide. Yeah, the early days of road safety audit, one of the early pioneers of road safety, Mr. Malcolm Bulpett. He's one of the early pioneers, and he had mentioned that I'm representing your mother as she tries to cross the street. I want to make sure that the crossing is safe as possible. An accomplished road safety auditor who's done a lot of work in road safety, and we will continue to understand what's the process setting up our road safety audit. Next slide, please. We don't own this road, but we actually share the road space. This is an image from Al Ain where we have the carriageway, single carriageway, and we have camels crossing. So the road is not belonging to anybody. It's a shared space, and we are responsible to make sure that the roads are safe for all road users. Next slide, please. What is a road safety audit? Why do we do them? What are the standards? Commissioning of an RSA, responding to RSA, common problems, conflicts, and design team response and exception reporting. All of this will be covered in the slides ahead, and some part will be covered by myself and some will be taken by Engineer Job. Next slide, please. So what's a road safety audit? A road safety audit is an independent check by experts to reduce the chances of a road traffic collision. And if one were to occur, to ensure that we reduce the severity of that collision. We try to ensure that appropriate crash reducing features are implemented in the design and the operation of the road network. The overriding question in the road safety audit is who can get hurt and why, and who can get hurt and how can that be prevented. Next slide, please. The road safety audit is not a standards check for compliance to standards. It's not a redesign exercise if it were to be done after stage 0 and stage 1. I shall explain what is stage 0, stage 1 in the following slides. It's not a snagging list after a stage 3 or a stage 4. And it's absolutely no ways a method to stop or to delay a scheme. And neither is it a mechanism to criticize a design that has been produced by a designer. Next slide, please. Just because a scheme is not built to standard, it doesn't mean that it's unsafe. Similarly, just because a scheme is built to absolute standards doesn't mean it is safe either. There could be some particular combinations that has been created which creates a very dangerous condition. And this is what is checked by way of a road safety audit process. Next slide. What are the benefits of conducting a road safety audit? There have been studies done worldwide, and some of the cost-benefit ratios or benefit to cost ratios are shown up in the slide here. I will just read out a few lines. The benefit to cost ratio for individual audits can range from 3:1 to 242:1. For existing road audits, the benefit could range anything between 2.4:1 to 84:1. Approximately 78% of recommendations made through a road safety audit have benefit to cost ratios of greater than 10. But the main reason of the road safety audit is to prevent something that you see in the next slide. Is to prevent something like this. This is ultimately what a road safety audit is trying to prevent, mitigate, or make the roadside more forgiving. Let's move to the next slide. Some numbers, some statistics from the UAE context. Fatal crashes 2017-18 between the Emirates. All the Emirates are shown up in the slides here. Abu Dhabi, Ajman, Dubai, Fujairah, Ras Al Khaimah, Sharjah, Al Quwain. Next slide, please. These are the injury crashes. Obviously, they are much more than the fatalities that is shown on the previous slide. But again, to show that there has been work done and there seems to be a reduction in the KSIs across Emirates. Next slide. These are the numbers pertaining to Abu Dhabi. From 2007 all the way up to 2019, these are absolute numbers of fatalities occurring on the Abu Dhabi road network, and we see a downward trend year on year. Next slide, please. What's the standard in Abu Dhabi? In Abu Dhabi, we follow the TR 540, which is the road safety audit manual, which is shown to you on the slide there. This manual clearly sets out the process and the procedures of selecting auditors, qualification of auditors, how an audit is done, and who can become a road safety auditor. We will explain more about this in the slides ahead. Next slide. Many other countries have also adopted the road safety audit manual, some of which are shown here. Ireland, Dubai, Qatar, UK, South Africa, Australia. Many countries have adopted the road safety audit process, obviously because of the benefits it shows in the process of making the road safer. Next slide, please. What are the stages in the road safety audit process? I mentioned stage 0, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. A stage 0 is typically done when it's at the planning stage or the designs are at concept level. Issues can be picked up at that level or at that stage and resolved before we go to the next stage, which is the stage 1, where you have preliminary designs. Issues that are picked up in stage 1 would then move on to the stage 2 designs. A stage 2 is the final check that you get to resolve issues in the design or on the drawings before they get constructed on the ground. A stage 3 is an audit conducted pretty much on completion of the project. It could be pre-opening check, or it could be post-opening, or maybe immediately after opening, depending on how complex the scheme is. We also do a stage 4, and stage 4 is typically done 12 to 36 months after the opening of the scheme with crash data. Next slide, please. The design stage RSA becomes extremely important because this is the only time that you get a chance to pick up the issues on the designs and to have them rectified. If these are not picked up and resolved in the design stage, they get picked up at stage 3. And at stage 3, once they are built or constructed, they become prohibitively expensive to fix or to resolve. And sometimes it could lead to abortive works and sometimes a lot of variation claims. Please never tell the auditor that it has been designed to standard or it has been approved. The road safety auditor knows his job. He already knows what it, and he's not going to be worried what the argument is. He's trying to ensure that the scheme is as safe as possible. Next slide, please. What are the standards? Every audit must have a team leader and at least one team member. Both have requirements for training and experience. You can see on the right side, for a team leader, what is the skills that is required? He needs to demonstrate 5 years of safety engineering, crash analysis, or collision investigation. He should have attended a 10-day recognized collision investigation and road safety engineering course. This is a mandatory course that needs to be attended for him to have experience about crashes and to understand why crashes happen and how can they be avoided. Plus the other requirements are he should have conducted minimum audits in the past 1 year or 2 years and continuous CPD requirements, and can demonstrate a well-rounded highways design experience to become a qualified road safety auditor. I would like to mention here that you start off as an observer, you do the course, you do certain amount of training and audits under a team leader and member. From there you get elevated to a member, continue the same process, participate in audits, CPD, training, and then you get qualified as a team leader. Next slide, please. How is a road safety audit team decided? The road safety team has to be approved and they need to meet the local standards in terms of experience and training. You can only become a team leader if you are able to demonstrate the required experience and the knowledge to be qualified as a team leader. And experiences should be shown relevant to the current project. The roads authority here would look at the CVs and then they will give approvals for personnel or candidates for road safety audit team leader, team member, and observer. The team is appointed following the approval by the authority, and then the client or the design team who wants to have the audit conducted would produce an audit brief and issue it to a road safety audit team. And then the road safety audit team, which is obviously recognized by the roads authority, would go on to produce the audit. Next slide, please. The audit team leader reviews the brief. Possibly he may ask for more information. If he has to get more information, he would ask from the design or the client. He may invite special auditors or advisors to certain schemes depending on the complexity. Generally, it's a desktop exercise, but then it's also followed by a site visit. Site visit becomes extremely critical and must be undertaken at every stage of the road safety audit, which means you do a site visit at stage 1, you do a site visit at stage 2, you obviously do a site visit at stage 3, because things can change very rapidly within a few months between preliminary design and detailed design. Next slide, please. Here shows some of the, utility chambers which have been already constructed in a location where this would be to the curb lines, so it could be a pedestrianized area. This wasn't there before the when the designs were being done, but immediately when the designs have got approved, they starting being shown up on the roadside. These are just examples, and these could be feeder boxes, this could be fire hydrants, this could be street lighting, this could be falconized, and this could be any other utility boxes which is being placed in a pedestrian ramp, and all of them needs to be checked in the design stage, because that's the only time when you get a chance to put them away or set them away out of the pedestrian desire lines. So what happens once the audit is done? Next slide, please. The auditors would produce a report. A report would be produced for a designer where he would highlight the potential hazards and he would propose remedial and viable recommendations. So a report will have the issues and recommendations that is given by the auditors. And then the design team would take it and they would give you a design team response. This notes that the road safety problem, and this is generally done so that the design team is able to inform the client what actions needs to be taken for the issues that have been raised by the auditors. Next slide, please. This is the typical decision tracking form that has been populated just to the initial stages. The issues are raised, the risk rating is populated and put medium, high risk, low and high risk. Recommendations are given, photos are attached, and then the designers would come in and they would make their argument whether they accept the hazard or not. From there, it goes to the audit team again. Audit team makes their decision. Finally, it goes to the client, and the client is the one who generally makes the final decision. Next slide, please. The decision team response is not a response to the audit team. So the designers, when they respond, their response is not focused to the auditor's comments, but it is more to the client to explain to him what needs to be done to resolve the issue. It should be written as the design team would advise exactly what should be done, and the client ultimately makes the decision. This is for all projects, private developer projects, government projects, any projects. The client is the ultimate decision maker. Next slide, please. An RSA is not a criticism of design. Those undertaken RSAs should have specialist experience in collision investigation and prevention. This is an absolute key. Hence, in the requirement for team leaders, collision investigation and road safety engineering is a mandatory requirement, because if you don't know what the problem is, you may not be able to solve it. Next slide, please. That's Engineer Dave George who will be speaking to you next. Okay. The road safety audit team is generally independent of the design team, and this is a standard. You wouldn't be able to audit a design which is within the same organization, and it's forbidden in most of the standards of the road safety audit manuals. This is because there is a pride of ownership. The argument is that this is my design, this is the best design, and nobody can say that my design is not the best design. 97% of the time, the problem is not with the road itself, but how the people interpret and use the scheme. Road user behavior is also a primary cause of crashes. Road safety auditors should also be able to understand what is the road user behavior, and he would recommend a lot of things which is beyond, which is above and beyond a standard. Next slide, please. This is a section of the road between two intersections, pretty straight, having traffic. Can you just move next slide? Yeah, this is about 17 crashes in 6 years between two IPs. This is specific to Alain, but it's very general. Next. It's got AADT of 60,000 vehicles per day. Next, please. Which translates to around 22 million vehicles per year. Next, please. which is about 1.314 million vehicles in a year. Next, please. So 1 in every 7.7 million drivers causes an injury crash. This is a crash risk, and the crash risk exists. Maybe the road is perfectly fine, alignments are good, that there are no features but then still crashes occur, and crashes are occurring, so the crash risk is obviously there. Next slide. Something about the road infrastructure. Crashes occur, but whenever they occur, the roadside infrastructure is the single most significant factor that contributes to the severity of outcome of the crash. There is no doubt that human error causes or leads to majority of these crashes, but the road layout, the signing, lining, and furnishings can determine whether the severity of the collisions is very severe or you pretty much walk out of the crash. As said earlier, standards is not always safe. Next slide, please. We should ensure as designers and people who are working on the roadside that we do not provide hazards on the road. And we need to ensure that there are clear zones maintained so that if any vehicle were to leave the carriageway, he's not going to be driving into a foundation or a street pole which is shown there on a single carriageway road, or else a ramp which is there to protect the gantries. There are some options available according to Highway Design Manual, and designers need to take into account some of these mitigations. Either you remove the hazard, you make it transversible, you relocate the hazard, make it crash worthy, shield it, or delineate it. These are the hierarchies in what way you can reduce the severity of a crash and remove the hazard out of the clear zone. Next slide, please. Always we need to look at the long-term solutions. Anytime you do a road safety audit or an inspection, you have to look at the long term. It's not just to solve the problem now, but to take the knowledge and apply it in many other schemes. And this is where a good road safety auditor has learned out of experience of doing plenty audits. Repetitive concerns and issues picked up at jobs may need to be revisiting the standards. And so a road safety audit process is also to learn and to revisit and check whether your standards are correct, and if not, you need to modify the standards. Compliance to standards to every country is required and essential, but people involved in design, construction, and maintenance should look beyond design standards. Compliance to standard doesn't guarantee a safe road network. Next slide, please. This is the last slide. I'm going to pass it on to Engineer Dave George. If you don't know the problem, how would you know how to fix it? This is a typical roundabout, and generally roundabouts are made as a traffic calming feature where there's a deflection and the drivers would slow down as they enter the roundabout. But what is observed most of the times is they drive straight into the roundabout. Here you can see a typical image of a collision diagram where the driver has driven into the roundabout and he's driven into the infrastructure or the kind of the hazards that are there within the roundabout. Sometimes you may have enforcement issues. It could be an education issue. And always the overriding road safety audit question is who will get hurt, how do we reduce the probability, severity, or both, and the opportunity to continuously improve the safety of the road for all users. Thank you very much, and I will mute myself and pass it on to Engineer Dave.
Okay, thanks for that, Nandish. Now I'll be taking the bulk of the presentation, which is actually responding to the RSA, because I think that's what more people here are interested in. I see some local auditors here, I see some auditors from back in the UK, but this is mainly focused on trying to improve responding to the RSA, speeding things up and getting it done quicker. The first task you need to consider is review the problem. When we're doing a road safety audit, we don't know all of the facts on the scheme. We are using your plans. Not all the information is always there. So when you get your road safety audit in from the road safety audit team, review the problem and see if there's any reason you do not think it will occur. Is the RSA team not aware of something? However, you have to be careful. Engineers are logical. Road users are not. I'm sure as you drive around the road, you see people doing things like, what are you doing that for? We have to think about those road users using your scheme. Next slide, please. Next up, what is the recommendation? The first thing a design team should do is ask, is it feasible? Can we do what the audit team is asking? Unfortunately, there are audit teams out there who don't have a lot of experience in design and construction, and sometimes will recommend something that is unfeasible. Hopefully it will be feasible, but what you have to consider next is, what is the impact? Your design team response should be advising the client what the impact of actually complying with the RSA is. Remember what Nandish has been saying. These are road safety experts experienced in crash investigation and prevention. So you should automatically default that there's a problem here. We want to do the recommendation ideally, but what is the impact? You're not talking to me as a road safety auditor, you're responding to your client. Next slide, please. All road safety audit recommendations should be proportional and viable, as in they are actually constructible, you can do it, it's not going to cause major problems, and the value of the works will reflect the risk of what the problem has been identified. As a design team, you need to consider the construction cost, the traffic flow, level of service. There may be utilities not shown on the drawings that you're aware of. The one that Nandish showed you previously, that chamber appeared in about 6 weeks before a stage 1 I did out in the desert and the stage 2. It just appeared there. The design team didn't know about it. We didn't know about it. There may be land take issues or distance issues, public transport services. You need to consider all these problems to make sure that the recommendation isn't impacting anything. Next slide, please. So when you do your DTR, you should initially state whether it's accepted or not. And if you don't accept it, you need to give good reasoning, and whether the recommendation is feasible or not. And again, reasoning in there. If it is feasible, then the design team can highlight the impact, and then it's the client's decision where to go from here. And we'll talk about the client, especially with third-party developers, in a bit. If it's not feasible, then the design team are completely free to make an alternative suggestion. Hopefully the problem's been explained well. You should be able to go, well, we can't do this, but perhaps we could do that. Next slide, please. The biggest reason for design team responses being rejected that I come across is, no, we can't do that. That doesn't help anybody. We're trying to save lives here. We're trying to stop injury. We cannot do that. It's just going to get your design team response rejected in our lane and many other places. It's an excuse. It's people wanting to tick the boxes. The problem remains. There's a chance somebody could be hurt or killed here because of this problem. We need to fix it. Next slide, please. So if a recommendation is unfeasible, you need to explain why it's not easy to do or can't be done, and then give an alternate solution. It's not an option. In pretty much all standards around the world, it's within the standard to say the design team, if you can't do it, should with alternatives. Next slide, please. Once the design team has responded to everything, the DTR should be returned to the audit team leader. Now, the reason for this, that the audit team leader has another look at it, is to check that the design team have understood the problem. Sometimes they don't. That can be due to the audit report not being clear, or the design team not reading it correctly. If they've agreed to incorporate the recommendation into the design, or they've proposed an alternative suitable solution, usually no further comments, let's move on. However, again, the client has the last say in it. Next slide, please. Problems generally arise when the design team do not accept the problem. That can be a big problem in that they should not be arguing between the road safety specialists and the design team. If there is a specific issue why the problem will not occur that the audit team is not aware of, then yes. I've had plenty of audits where I've gone, this is a problem. The design team's come back with some more information. Well, it's not a problem because of this, this, and this. And I've gone, yeah, absolutely fine. No further comments. The problems arise when the design team rejects the recommendation without providing an alternative. There's a problem, we have to have the solution. And sometimes the solution may not be within the design team's remit, but we need something in this tracking sheet or design team response to move things on. Sometimes the design team will propose an alternative recommendation that does not address the problem. Again, this is quite common because the road safety auditors should be expert in crash investigation and prevention and have experience in dealing with crash cluster sites, know what helps and what doesn't. And then we get to the final issue where the client rejects everything, even when agreed by the design team and the audit team leader. Next slide, please. Usually when we're on the first of those, the design team rejects the recommendation without giving an alternative. Generally, the audit team leader can simply not accept the DTR. It's not a proper DTR. The standard says you must propose an alternative solution. And we don't want to get stuck in this loop. We don't want the design team saying, no, we're not doing that. And the audit team leader going, well, something's got to be done. Yeah, but we're not doing that. Yeah, but something's got to be done. It's easier for the design team to simply come up with an alternative solution. This is when the audit team leader has his second opportunity to go, actually, no, that won't work either. But if we can't do the first one, here's something else. Next slide, please. I mean, here is a design team response I would like everybody to consider. We cannot implement the recommendation because reasons. We have considered A, B, and C as alternative solutions, but these do not work because reasons. Therefore, we do not consider that there is a proportional and viable recommendation to resolve this problem. We propose certain minor works to try and mitigate some of the risk as far as practical. If you're completely stumped and there is no proportional and viable solution, that's a way to move forward. Sometimes we have problems in road safety audit that cannot be fixed. Next slide, please. But when proposing alternative recommendations, you've got to think like road users, like drivers, riders, and pedestrians. Another very common one I get is, oh, it's okay, we'll install a stop sign here. That way all the drivers will stop and that will be the solution. My question is, does everybody come to a complete and total stop at every stop sign you reach? I'm sure our UK audience will say absolutely, because the penalties and enforcement in the UK for reaching a stop sign is quite serious. Next slide, please. So as we get this alternative recommendation so often, we did a bit of a survey. Here's a junction within our lane, controlled by a stop sign. I wonder if any of the audience would like to try and have a guess what percentage of vehicles came to a full and proper stop as per the law, even if there was no vehicles. You may have had a bit of a clue there. So next slide, please. Absolutely nobody. So proposing a stop sign when everybody knows generally people do not stop at stop signs is not a solution. It's just trying to tick the box. It's just trying to treat road safety audit as a tick box exercise. The designers who are using this stop sign response are unlikely to be stopping at stop signs themselves. So it's an issue we have. Next slide, please. So when coming to alternative solutions, because you can't implement the primary recommendation in the road safety audit, you need to come up with a solution that addresses the problem, but actually does work. One of the big issues I had a few years ago was when Abu Dhabi Emirate had a known speed limit buffer. There was the posted speed limit, and generally it was not enforced until 20 kph above that limit. Everybody knew this, and that's how everybody drove. And I would have consultants coming in saying, "You're saying this junction is not suitable for an 80 kph speed." No, it's not. Yes, but the posted limit is 60. Yes, but everybody knows the enforcement is done at 80 and 60 at that time. Therefore, everyone's driving at 80 nearly. No, the posted speed limit is 60. So I would ask them, the municipality here is surrounded by 60 kph roads. What speed were you driving on these roads to get here? Oh, I was driving at 80. So that's my point. No, the speed limit is posted at 60. It was a very frustrating argument, and now the speed limit buffer, that's gone now. But this is what I'm trying to say. We use 85th percentile for speed. Why don't we use 85th percentile behavior? Next slide, please.
Yeah, yes, I'm listening. I've got on some earphones.
Here we have some acceleration lanes from a free right turn. Drivers should use the image on your left. However, we know generally they take the path on the right. Next slide, please. Drivers should take the path on the left. However, anybody who knows this interchange in LA, which is the Northern Ring Road with Zayed Al Awal Street, knows you have to be very careful when using the deceleration lane here, because most drivers will go from the middle lane and take the racing line through this exit. We don't have to consider every driver on the road, but we must consider the common behaviours. What do most drivers do? At this junction, most drivers do not use the deceleration lane. So we have to think about how drivers are going to use the scheme, not how they should. We're not asking design teams to consider the driver doing 200 on a 100 kph design, but we are asking them to consider the ones that are doing 110, 120,
yeah,
which is more common.
Sorry, David. Can you all mute your microphones, please, apart from David, who is speaking? Thank you.
Next slide, please. So now we get onto the client. Most standards around the world are written as to it is the client that has the ultimate decision, and the Abu Dhabi Emirate and others are no different. However, we get into problems here when we're talking about third-party development schemes. When the client is the roads authority, it's fairly easy because they can do the exception report. If the design team and the audit team have not been able to agree, or the client believes that the recommendation should not be implemented, then they can move on by producing an exception report. There's very different ways of doing this. Nandi showed the tracking sheet from Abu Dhabi municipality. Alain generally used something very similar, where it states the road safety audit problem, the road safety audit recommendation, the design team response, the audit team leaders comments on the response, and then finally the last column is for the client decision, who might say we go with the auditors, we go with the design team, or we don't do anything. But it needs to be recorded and explained why. Next slide, please. When it's a third-party scheme, we get the same situation, and they fill in the last column. However, of course, a developer might not want to be spending the money or does not see the benefit in spending the money. And this is where we have a bit of a conflict, because then the approval from the local roads authority might require them to comply with the road safety audit. Next slide, please. Generally, this is for the client and the road safety audit authority. This is for the client and the road authority management to sort out. Once the design team and the road safety audit get in there, make the decision and agree on a way forward, then there has to be some negotiation. Next slide, please. Just looking at a few common problems where I've seen DTRs that have been stuck. This was a new scheme in our lane. As you can see, there's a very nasty little kink in the curb there. It shouldn't be there. There's no need for it. There was an issue at the design. Next slide, please. It wasn't spotted in the stage 2 safety audit. And when we did the stage 3, we identified it as a problem. And the design team response, technically it's the contractor response at this point, but it's still called the design team response, constructed as approved design. That's not getting us anywhere. We've got a problem. We've got kinks in the road, which is sufficient enough that people are going to straight line the alignment, and there's a good possibility for sideswipe collisions. Next slide, please. It might be true that they have built it as per the design, but we need to move forward and solve the problem. So again, when I talk to contractors, I say, here's an example. The design has been reviewed and the construction is as per the approved design. To remove the kink and straighten this section will require a variation order and will cost in the region of X dirhams. That to me is a good design team response. If we finally got there and my response as audit team leader was no further comments, then it was up to the client to review it and move forward. Next slide, please. On the same scheme, here we have another problem. I don't know if anyone can notice, but we have a lane gain arrangement on the exit from a set of traffic signals, but we've got a stop line on the free right turn. There's no need for that stop line. Next slide, please. Again, the stop line is technically a hazard. Most drivers who get used to that area will know there's no need to stop. We've already said very few drivers stop at stop lines, but most do slow down a bit and treat it as a give way. So we have a situation where some drivers may slow and other drivers won't because they know it's a lane gain. The original design team response was very much, it's as per the approved drawings, that's it. But that's not going to get the design team response and the scheme closeout moving forward. So again, they can use something like constructed as per approved design. Stop line can be removed and the hatching no passing line added as per RSA recommendation following variation order. That's what they used. Ideally, as you're advising the client, you should give them an indication of cost. However, this was a scheme over 100 million dirhams, and for a couple of thousand to pull it right, I don't think the client was too bothered. Next slide, please. A common one we raise in the design process is the staggered crossroads. Again, if a driver drives it correctly, there's no problem. But anybody who drives will know that very often drivers straight line these. So the road safety audit recommendation was, let's put a splitter island, which will discourage some of the straight lining maneuvers. Next slide, please. However, what the audit team did not know is there was an Etisalat, the telecoms provider for the Emirates, within the verge, so the junction itself couldn't be widened sufficiently to install a splitter island. And this was a good design team response I was really happy with. They said, we can't widen this junction because of the Etisalat chamber. However, we could raise the entire staggered crossroads to slow down traffic. Now, it reduces the risk by slowing vehicles down, reduces any potential severity in case two vehicles do clip trying to straight line the junction at the same time. It's acceptable. Therefore, audit team leader response was no further comments. Next slide, please. Sometimes you will get a scheme and a problem that is so insurmountable that nothing can be done. In this case, is it possible to maintain road safety at its current level, what we call having a nil detriment? Yes, you're going to put something in that's got an identified problem, but can we solve road safety generally so that the safety of the area is no better or no worse? Ideally, we want it better, but sometimes we get really stuck. Next slide, please. This is a junction for a large Emirati housing development, hundreds and hundreds of villas to go in. And when it came to us, it was a right in, right out on a very high speed, lower standard dual carriageway. It was not a safe place to put a junction, and under the current standards, you're not allowed to put a right in, right out on that road because it's almost as a freeway. You can see from the plans, this road was built 30, 40, maybe more years ago. I've seen aerial photography going back to the 80s, and it was as it is then. But the villas are going in. There was no stage 0. The construction has already started. They need an access to this development. Next slide, please. As you can spot, the next junction down has a big problem. We've got 5 or 6 injury crashes there in the last few years. And then between that right in, right out and the next big interchange, we've got another half dozen injury crashes, which are partially due to weaving problems caused by this right in, right out and the interchange. If I'd got this at stage 1, I would have gone the roundabout to the north on the E16. Let's upgrade that road and have that as the main access to this development and not have a direct access to this major E-road Abu Dhabi Al Ain. However, it's too late and the junction was going in. So what can we do? Next slide, please. The first one was to over-design the proposed right-in, right-out, extra enhanced signs, concrete barriers with crash cushions to encourage people to slow down. The second one was an idea I came up with in order to try and get us to nil detriment. Next slide, please. That next junction to the west was a horrible junction and causing a lot of injury crashes. So the solution was, as part of the project, let's get that junction closed. We divert the traffic from the old residential area into the new residential area to use the new junction, which we don't like, but it's going in, and we close this one, and then we solve 2 big road safety problems on this road. The junction itself, which is unsafe, and the weaving issue, because the proximity of this right in, right out, and the end of its acceleration lane to the grade separated interchange. Not brilliant, but it does solve the problem. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I think we've skipped a couple. That's it. Thank you. I think there must be a delay. I think that photograph might not be compressed, so it's taking a minute to load. One of the common problems we get under road safety audit while we're waiting for the next slide to load is the visibility from junctions and side roads. Again, we've already raised that stop signs generally do not work. This is from a road safety audit of an upgrade of the road. Obviously, the scheme itself isn't the problem, it's the existing situation. But we need to do something here because when we upgrade this road, nice new surfacing, speeds will increase and this visibility is unsafe. Next slide, please. As Nandish mentioned, we shouldn't fall back on standards. Here's the Urban Street Design Manual for the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, similar to the UK Manual for Streets. It has one standard visibility distance, 25 meters by 2.4 meters. Next slide, please. At 60 kph, a driver is traveling at 16.7 meters per second. So if you work on a 1.6 second reaction time, the crash has happened before the driver on the main road has even touched their brake pedal. Next slide, please. The common argument I get is, but this is a 40 kph road, so drivers won't be traveling at that speed. I mean, even if they're only doing 50, they're still not touching their brake until they're less than 3 meters from the impact. So I hope everyone's got their chat windows open, because we've got a new game show here, Guess the Speed. If you would like to have a guess, next slide please. What you think the surveyed 85th percentile speed was here? A 220 meter long residential street next to a school, 40 kph speed limit. Anybody want to have a guess? 70, 78, 70, 75, 58. I'm thinking Ian Hendricks has seen this presentation before. Could you reveal the speed, please? 56. So yes, Ian was very close. Quite worrying, some of those high speeds. Next slide, please. Again, same sort of situation, residential street, 40 kph speed limit. It's only 80 meters speed hump. Yes. 80, 50, 60, 65, 59. People are obviously basing on the last one. Can you reveal the speed, please? 59. So again, we have to take into account the 85th percentile speed. We have to take into account the 85th percentile driver. It's no point just saying, oh, they shouldn't be doing that when we know they do. Next slide, please. This was a bit of research we were undertaking in our lane on how hump spacing was affecting speeds on residential streets. And as you can see, generally 85th percentile speeds, once you get over 130, 140 meter hump spacing, is around 50 kph. Next slide, please. So when you have a problem like this, there are generally multiple solutions. When I have a problem like this in a road safety audit, I state the visibility should be suitable for the speed. This gives the design team two options: either increase the visibility or slow the approach speeds. Road humps work very well in the Emirates. We get a small minority of people who don't slow with their big 4x4s, but the vast majority do, so road humps do work. So if you can't sort one problem, sort the other. Next slide, please. Sticking with speed, we'll reduce the posted speed limit, another very common design team response. In reality, it very rarely works. In fact, we've found when we've reduced the speed on a road, it can actually increase the 85th percentile. Why is this? Well, I've done a bit of reading up in research. One theory is that drivers, if they do not respect the speed limit, will ignore the speed limit. So at 80 kph, the driver may be thinking this speed limit feels a bit low, but it's not too bad. Drop it to 60 and they think, well, this is a silly speed limit. It's inappropriate and I'm going to drive at what I feel is appropriate. Next slide, please. So here's one of the roads we did drop the speed limit. It was 100 kph. We've got Twoya Park there. We've got dense residential. We've got a lot of bus stops. We've got a lot of pedestrians. We had crash problems. So we reduced the speed from 100 kph to 80 kph. And the 85th percentile went up by 1 kilometre an hour. Not a lot, but it wasn't getting the speed reduction we were aiming for. Next slide, please. We get too many design team responses that are treating road safety audit like a tick box exercise. Get it done, get it ticked off, get it out. A common one I see is when we highlight there's a protected tree in the way and the consultant goes, tree to be removed or relocated. We go, no, this is a protected tree. This is a gaff tree. These are very difficult to relocate. They have tap roots that go down to about 30 meters. And it's protected. It's not an easy thing to do. But the consultant says, but we've put on the note to be relocated or removed. That's it. We've done our bit. Let's move on. What we're trying to do is save people's lives, stop injury, stop property damage. We need solutions, not just an excuse to move on. Here it's very different. Back in the UK, Road Safety Audit has moved on since the 90s. And the question I always ask, one day things will move on here to be more like the UK. Can you argue your design team response in court? Next one, please. So, generally getting towards the end here. First job, reiterating, check the problem. It's possible the RSA team don't know something about the scheme that you do, which means it won't be a problem. That is extremely rare, but it happens. Check the recommendation. Is it feasible? Can it be done? Is it proportional and viable? I've seen road safety audit recommendations at stage 3, post-construction, wanting the alignment of a bridge to be changed. That isn't going to happen. That's not proportional and viable. That should not be a road safety audit recommendation. What's the impact if you do the recommendation or your alternative recommendation? How are you advising your client? Now, I understand that the vast majority of times, the client wants the design team to make the decision, wants to guide them. But under the standard, you should be advising your client. Before you reject it, read the problem carefully, do it again, and a third time. We get a lot of design team responses that are rejected because the design team has just quickly read the problem, not understood it, and has the situation wrong. If you can't do the RSA recommendation, your first thought should be, so what are we going to do? What's the alternative? Next slide, please. If the audit team leader does not agree with your alternative recommendation, that's not the end of the road, providing you follow the requirements of the standard. There can be more dialogue. The audit team leader can say, yes, I see where you're going, but I think that's not going to work as we want. Therefore, we have maybe a third option. If you can't come to the decision and you can't get a recommendation that the design team and the audit team leader agree on, then it has to go to the client, or in the end, the roads authority, to make the decision. And this is where we get the problems with third-party developers and local authorities, in that the local authority says, do the recommendation, the client doesn't want to, it can get a bit messy. Next slide, please. So generally, there's 3 outcomes, which covers 95% of the RSA recommendation. Design team says, no, we're not doing anything. The audit team leader is likely to reject that. The local authority is liable to reject that. But it can still come down to the client making the decision, but that's very rare. Design team recommends to adopt the RSA recommendation. Those are my favorite. I just write no further comments. Let's get it off the desk. Or the design team proposes the alternative recommendation. The audit team can either accept that and go, yep, we can do that instead, or say, no, that's not going to solve the problem. However, here's a third option. Next slide, please. And at the middle of this, the core of all this is the client. That is how the standard is written. And I've already seen some of the questions posed in the group chat about when the client is a third-party developer. And there is no easy solution to this. So the client should be taking the advice of the design team on the impact of the changes, what that will mean for the budget, the timescale, the level of service, land issues and the like, what the road safety auditor is saying and what the possible outcomes are, and then making the decision. Proceed as per the road safety audit recommendation, ignore the road safety audit recommendation and produce an exception report to say we're not doing what the road safety audit says, this is why, or proceed with the alternative solution as per the design team response, which the audit team might not agree with. Next slide, please. So here's a DTR feedback exception report all in one. Next slide, please. I've got them zoomed in. The audit team identified that the design speed of the road was to be 120 kph, but the posted limit was also to be 120 kph. As all highway engineers should know, I hope, we have a design speed and we have a posted speed limit, and we have that safety buffer in between. 120 kph road should have 140 kph design speed for those drivers who go a little over the limit, and we know lots of drivers do that. So the recommendation in the road safety audit is to use a design speed of 140. Next slide, please. The designer's response was, yes, we agree with the recommendation that you should have the safety buffer. That's in AASHTO, the British DMRB, and our local TR514. Increasing the design speed will require a large radius on one part, and it's liable to add 5% to the scheme cost. The audit team has no comments. It moves on to the client decision. Next slide, please. Currently, there is an Executive Council instruction that in Abu Dhabi, the posted speed limits are equal to the design speed. Therefore, the client has overruled both the road safety audit and the design team, but they have given their reasons. So that's it, it's closed out. If this was a developer scheme with an Executive Council decision, I don't think there would be any argument, it would be accepted. But if this was a developer third-party scheme, then there may be a bit of a problem there whether the local authority accepts the client response, which is in the end the exception report. Next slide, please. So in summary, road safety audit is there to reduce the occurrence and severity of crashes. That's all it's there for. It's to save lives, to save injury, and to save property damage, whether it's a person's car or it's our safety fence and lighting column. Proper road safety auditors are experts in crash investigation and prevention. The training and experience for road safety auditors focuses on crash investigation, prevention, road safety engineering. It doesn't focus on road safety audit. I can teach someone to do road safety audit in a matter of hours. It's a process. It's like a medical prescription, problem recommendation. However, what you know, what you have to know to be able to identify the problem and the recommendation takes years of experience. It's not just a yes or no. We need to get a solution that meets, becomes safer on the roads. Next slide, please. A quick note on the Society of Road Safety Auditors. That was set up in 2007 in the UK as an association of the Chartered Institution of Highways and Transportation. It's very similar to a local branch, so it's very much like the Dubai branch, but rather than the members being from an area such as London or Dubai, it's a specialist discipline. There's 4 grades of membership. Affiliate is open to anybody with an interest in RSA. Associate, where you meet the requirements of observer in the local RSA standard. Member meets the requirements of a member. And fellow is the highest grade of membership. Next slide, please. Members are reviewed annually to ensure they are maintaining their requirements. I got reviewed back in March, April time, and I passed my annual. They produce technical guidelines and practice notes on road safety audit, and there's an annual conference in the UK, or there usually is an annual conference. Obviously this year everything's been up, but SoRSA is shown on the IHT website, and if anyone's got any queries on SoRSA, please feel free to contact me and I can explain more. As Jonathan explained in the introduction, I was vice chair in 2010, but had to stand down because I was moving out here. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Everyone, thanks Jonathan for giving us the opportunity to attend these amazing webinars that are only getting better and more interesting every time. And of course, thanks to Mr. David and Mr. Nandish for this excellent presentation. I have some questions raised, and some of them actually have been answered throughout the presentation. So if the time allows, I will ask them just to clarify these questions for everyone. I will start with a question. I think this goes to David, but please, David and Nandish, feel free just to jump in and answer as you see suitable. So the first question is about the legal consequences. So the question is, will the client or the designer face legal consequences if they deny to follow the road safety auditor's recommendations? If it has 0 crashes and the problems reported, or any legal implications of ignoring the audit's recommendations?
This is one of the main reasons I was worried about when I was told how many people from America, Australia, and the UK were signing up for this presentation. It is not the same here as it is elsewhere, that is true, and I am not aware of anyone ever getting into trouble with not following a RSA recommendation. I hope this will change. I have done road safety audits where I've identified a problem, and then a year or 2 later, I've done the post-fatal collision investigation where somebody has died there as a result of something that was raised in the road safety audit. If I was in the UK, then I would have been in a police interview room for several days, being interviewed under caution regarding the road safety audit and the whole process. And all the people involved with that project would be the same. And whoever took the decision to not implement the recommendation would have the potential to be going down for 10 years or more in prison for corporate manslaughter. And this is all part of the Road Death Investigation Manual in the UK. Now, as far as I'm aware, and people might know more about this than me, there is no corporate manslaughter legislation in the UAE currently. So at the minute, I would say there's no legal ramifications, but morally, currently, surely you do not want people to die on your schemes.
Yes. I think that's clear. The second question, thanks, David. The second question is about the vehicle restraint systems. Does the road safety auditor refer to the design guide TR 512 or some other guide? Are the designers using old systems as per old instructions and not as per the design guide? And what is the RSA point of reference?
Well, all road restraint systems should be to TR 518, the Emirate of Abu Dhabi roadside design guide for Abu Dhabi and the equivalent wherever. And road restraint systems are one of the most important systems within the audit. And I have to say, within the Emirate, we are severely lacking experts in the design of road restraint systems, crash barriers, and safety fence. We do not have any of the real experts, and I am really struggling. Road safety auditors aren't experts in everything. We can't be. We cover everything from street lighting to highway design to signs and markings to safety fences. So we know what we need to know. But the number of breach fatal collisions we're getting where people are going through crash barriers, where people are ramping and we're not providing passively safe ends. The actual photograph you can see in the slide at the minute, that was a lot of work to get those P4 terminals in there to make those passively safe. And yes, part two of the question, I do feed back the outcomes of road safety audit, the problems I see into the updates. Currently, I'm on the working group updating the manual for unified traffic control devices. I'm feeding back into the road restraint systems, and auditors are perhaps one of the best positioned to feed into the standards and improve them, because as part of our job as a road safety engineer, we should also be investigating the crash cluster sites, formerly known as accident black spots, and looking into the fatal crashes that appear on our network. So we're looking at the design, we're looking at the crashes that happens, we're looking at the fatals that happens, and we're feeding that back into the updating of the standards. I don't know if you've got anything to add, Nandish?
Yeah, I would just say one thing here, that the crash barriers are tested for up to 100 kilometers per hour speed. However, the speeds in Abu Dhabi are 120, 140, and even 160. So we definitely acknowledge that these systems wouldn't work in those kind of speeds. And we are constantly going to sites to see why the cars are piercing the barriers, and then they're going and hitting into infrastructure with extremely severe damage to property and to human life.
Yes. Thanks, David. Thanks, Nandish. I think that's also answering another question if the recommendations are included in the standards and manuals of ASH2 and the other councils. Is that correct?
Sorry, could you just repeat that, please?
Yeah, I mean that answering the previous question, that will answer also a question about if the recommendations are included in the standards and manual of ASH2 and the other, like, for example, Abu Dhabi Quality and the Conformity Council.
We have an interesting point here, and it's one I've had recently. In a road safety audit I led, I did a recommendation that a junction should actually be designed substandard. And that caused a few problems because the designer, who's used to working in another emirate where road safety auditors aren't always road safety experts, was actually shocked that I recommended not to follow standard. I explained it all out, and that by following the standard on his design, it created a road safety problem knock-on effect between two junctions. And by doing a substandard junction at one location, it didn't cause a road safety problem going substandard, but it solved a problem further upstream. And the designer was very confused about that because he expected, as a road safety auditor, I would say, you've got to meet the standards. And the very early slides Nandi's shown, just because it's not standard does not mean it's unsafe. And just because it is standard does not mean it's safe. So as a designer, you may actually have a problem where your auditors are telling you to go below standard, which is, of course, not usual for designer. However, that should be on the road safety auditor. And we go back to legal implications. That would be my decision. And if in the future we have corporate manslaughter laws and legislation here, I would be the one in the dock explaining to the judge why I instructed the standards to be to go below the standard. And I wouldn't say I'm happy to be in the dock explaining to a judge, and I've done expert witness in the past, and it's not the most pleasant experience, but that would be my responsibility.
Yes, that's clear. Thanks, David. Another question, how much the intelligent transportation system helps in the road safety?
ITS can help. For example, we have a lot of rear-end collisions on some of our high-speed roads where we have had one collision, we get a traffic jam, and then we have rear-end collisions with people not paying attention, not realizing the stationary traffic ahead. And a year or two ago, when I was driving out of Abu Dhabi, I saw on the VMS signs, crash ahead, stationary traffic ahead, or something like that. And within a couple of kilometers, I came to stationary traffic on a very high-speed road. So that is obviously very useful. Within traffic signal timing, it can improve road safety. Frustration is a big problem. If a driver is frustrated, they will take risks. So they may be coming up to a traffic signals and see the light changing. However, if it takes a long time for the traffic signals to cycle, like we do have some here in the Emirates, where it's one leg at a time for 4 legs, they may go and risk it and try and beat the light because they know they're going to be stuck there for 2 minutes. However, with ITS running, it's been 20-something years since I worked in traffic signals, so I think Scoot is not the system of the day, but a UTC system like Scoot helps improve traffic flow, reduce signal timings, and makes it less likely those drivers are going to want to run the red light because they know that they don't have to wait as long as if it was on a fixed time.
Thank you, David. I have another question. It's about the client makes the final decision. In terms of connection of private funded scheme and existing highway, the private client might have a different objective than a highway authority. How does this work in UAE?
Absolutely, and it can be a problem. I could, as a road safety auditor, say this junction is not safe as a priority junction and it should be signalized. Now, the commercial developer is looking to maximize his profit. That's his business, and he doesn't want to pay 1 million dirhams or more for a signalized junction. So then we do have this conflict between what the road safety audit says and what the client decides. And he is within his rights under the standard to say, no, that is not proportional and viable, therefore we are not doing it. This is when it gets pretty much taken out of the hands of the design team and the road safety audit team, and that is left to discussions between the developer as client and the local highway authority. I know in ADM their approvals are all connected all together, so this is all done as one, but in other locations it might be left to discussions between the management of the local highway authority and the developer, because in the end they need approval to be able to get their access onto the publicly funded network. Therefore, there needs to be agreement somewhere down the line.
I would like to add one thing here, that if you have a stage 0 done at such schemes, then generally you should have all the traffic controls and everything taken into consideration, and you don't get into design stage without getting approvals for how the controls will work, especially for junctions.
Absolutely, Nandish. That is one of the big problems we have. TR 540 specifically states you must have stage 0 on the concept master planning design. However, this rarely works. I rarely see it. And most of the time when I get to a private development, my first RSA, I go out on site and the building is half built.
Yeah.
The planned connections, parking and infrastructure do not work safely, but there is no room to fix the problem now. If we've got it at stage 0, tweaking things, not actually reducing development space, but generally moving things slightly would have allowed safe access. But by the time we get it, usually at stage 2, unfortunately, and it is a failure in our systems, it's too late to solve the problem.
Yes.
Thank you very much. There is a question actually about the rainfall events.
One of my favorites. Coming from England, obviously I know wet road surfaces a lot better, and I've changed my method of working. Obviously in the UK, with the amount of rain they get, apparently it's under 0.5 metre of water at the minute. My father was telling me earlier on a phone call. Micro and macro texture on the road surface is critically important. Here in the Emirates, it's not quite as important because it gives a better skid resistance during the dry period, which is 99% of our time. And one of the big problems we get with rainfall is drainage at roundabouts. As a road safety auditor on a high-speed roundabout, I want to see a positive camber. I want to see the road camber sloping towards the central island, as that gives the best grip for a driver going round. Now, many road designers and drainage want an adverse camber on a roundabout where the slope of the road, the crossfall, slopes away from the central roundabout to the verges. Now, this is the worst you can do, especially for high-sided vehicles, because the forters, as they go round the roundabout at speed, will topple the vehicle and give drivers of light vehicles less control. My argument is, for the few rainfall events we get each year, obviously I'm talking Al Ain, I understand the Northern Emirates are significantly wetter and they will have different considerations. It is better to provide a positive camber and accept we may get some drainage problems in rain events than have a road that is less safe for 360 days of the year. I'll take the wet 5 days of the year as the problem rather than the dry 360.
Yeah.
Thanks, David. I will finish with this question. Is there any governmental protocol for rating roads based on safety standards? For example, star rating for roads using IRAP, which is International Road Assessment Program, just for everyone to know.
Yeah, we don't actually have the equivalent of IRAP. I believe America has their own. I think Australia has a version. IRAP is generally Europe, I believe. But no, we don't. We do audits of existing roads. We're just finishing off in Al Ain. We've just employed a consultant to do audits of existing e-roads, and a consultant is designing solutions there to fix them. At the minute, the Emirates has only been really focusing on road safety for about 10 years. We still have a lot of problems with crash cluster sites. The IRAP system, generally developed in Europe, as many of the European countries have been doing road safety engineering for up to 40 years now. And a lot of the crash cluster sites have been solved. And you can see that by the way the deaths and injuries have dropped in places like the UK, the Netherlands, and they're really low at less than 3 deaths per 100,000 population. So they're looking at solutions to further improve their road. Currently, my argument is, do we improve the road where it is perceived to be unsafe, or do we spend our budget where we know there are actual crash problems? We now have data, which, as you've seen through this presentation, which allows us to show where the problems are, where people are getting injured, where people are dying. My philosophy is to solve these places first. The new access on the Emirati housing development that we saw, that was unacceptable levels of collisions, and we've got plenty of places like that. So for me, let's solve the problem where people are dying and getting injured year in, year out. Once we've solved those problems, we can start spending more money on, well, there could be a problem here and this isn't quite right. Let's get this fixed.
Yeah. Hello.
Okay, I think we're past the time of the questions and answers now. So we're basically at an end of the session. So just to conclude for this evening, thanks to David and Anjish for an excellent presentation and also for answering the questions so well afterwards as well. I think it's certainly the seminar this evening has set a record for the number of people attending. I think at one point it was 191, which given it's still only our fourth seminar we've been doing, that's an excellent turnout. So maybe looking ahead, we might be focusing more on technical methods and analytical methods for transport planning kind of moving forward. So it's something for us to think about as a committee. So anyway, thanks David and Nandish again for an excellent presentation, an excellent topic, and some really useful and informative stuff around road safety audit. Just to announce our next seminar, which will be on the 11th of August, and you know, we've all been experiencing it for better or worse since the beginning of March. We will be having a seminar on the impacts, issues and challenges of COVID-19 within the UAE in terms of the public health emergency, the impacts on personal mobility, and the responses from transport operators, and indeed looking forward at some point to the economic recovery and what comes after COVID. So we will be planning that for the 11th of August, and there will be further details of speakers and the precise topic posted on Eventbrite shortly, so look out for that. So with that, it's only for me now to say thanks to our speakers, thanks for everyone for attending. If you want to know more about the CIHT Dubai group, here's our email address, get in touch. And we'd be happy to have further discussions about our activities or any suggestions for improving what we do. So finally, thanks for coming tonight. See you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.